Hey there. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Gold Pill podcast. I am Meredith and I am here with my astounding, amazing, intriguing, I'm trying to think of another adjective. Fantastic,
Mysterious, fantastic.
mysterious, yes, creative, co-host Amy. Hi Amy, how are you?
I'm doing great, Meredith. Thank you so much, my lovely, wonderful, audacious, bold, sexy, incredible, magical co-host. She's
We're doing a big bold since Venus moved into Leo and everything just earlier this morning, which is kind of exciting for me because I am a Leo. It will be in my sign for 5 fucking months, which we love that. So yeah, how's your day?
Day has been good. We're having a barbecue later, so we were getting all of our meat and our vegetables for that, and I am very excited. It's the first barbecue of the saison, and I'm ready to get it going. So that's what I'm excited about. Yes.
That sounds so fun. I would love to go to a barbecue with Amy and eat Amy's meat and vegetables and whatnot.
Be here one day, girl.
One day, yeah. I believe that in my spirit that I feel like, okay, so I feel like this just came through just right now. I feel like we're going to meet this year.
It could happen every day. The more my consciousness expands into accepting the amount of people I now know around the States.
Yeah.
The United States seems really small, and a plane trip is like a couple $100, and it's just it used to seem like this big thing, and now it seems like, oh, you just go here, go there, go there, go there. So it's crazy what perspective will do, and all the different perspective shifts and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, I love that. Your world and my world, by virtue of doing this, has opened up quite a lot. And also, one of the things that me and Amy really bonded over, though I would say and I'm not too sure of your magical practices that you do, but I know that we are probably very different in the way that we approach it. However, I think that was one of the main things that we bonded on, was just how maybe powerful and expansive human consciousness can indeed be. That is the gold pill, is the fiery furnace of transmutation and what all that can lead into, so when you burn off the darkening, as it were. So we wanted to come talk today, just kind of toss around a few concepts about magic and about however you describe drawing down the cosmos to create your life. And so we wanted to talk about a word called neutrality, that sometimes comes up and is frequently misunderstood. And Amy was describing it before we got on here, and I thought that it was really profound and impactful the way that we were talking about it. So I'm excited to share more about that. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Well, we were talking about when we got into our magical practices, and I was sharing how last time, I think on the Patreon, I had started with Frater Xavier on YouTube, which is, I guess, I don't really practice a formal practice. So I guess it would be kind of chaos magic is what I am, because I just kind of learned from everything. And I'm sort of autodidactic in that way. So
yes, you are.
I was learning from this guy on YouTube. He seemed to know what he was talking about and everything. I took it pretty seriously. And one of the best pieces of advice or knowledge I ever got from him was about neutrality. And the way that he exposed the neutrality was initially by showing the inversion via the show Workaholics on Comedy Central. The whole premise is this really ridiculous show, and it's marketed to adults. It's adult entertainment. And it's funny. I enjoy Workaholics. I enjoy
it's a good show.
I think that's funny occasionally, and I think it actually did say a lot about the workforce and what the United States was becoming. I really do think there are things about it that are very salient, but the jokes in it and the art that the average person is grasping from it is not necessarily, in his purview, Frater Xavier's purview, adult. And so his whole thing was, if you want to start really understanding the inversion, you have to understand that it's a world that's created for children who are adults. And that's what they're doing, is they're marketing to adults who are children, and they think that they're marketing to adults. So children are aspiring
Dang.
to be bigger children, and adults are aspiring to be children. And he goes, if you just see that for what it is, and he goes, you got to ground in that. And so, and the thing is that when you first see, or you first catch whiff of the idea that there's an inversion and that I'm being treated like a child, there is like a natural response of a child, sort of like, well, why? Why would they? I'm not a child. And so you kind of have to burn through that, and that might take a little bit of time.
The feet stomping, I can hear it from here, and I have experienced that of like, hey, what the fuck?
Yeah,
you know?
it's totally unjust. It's totally ridiculous once you realize how you are viewed as like a market by, you know, a TV network, right? That's essentially what you are. You're not really anything beyond that. You're a number, and you in the real world are obviously so much more than a number. It's how they simplify viewing us. And so just to harken back to this idea that we're like children, it's this whole like matrixy prescribed sort of entertainment. And he said, so once you can ground in this reality and you can see it for what it is, and you can then see how it kind of by opposite should be.
Yeah.
You can sort of feel into like, well, if this is what they're calling adult entertainment, what adult entertainment would really look like is perhaps, I don't know, not economics, but more like
something a little highbrow, something a little bit like above like the level of pee-pee and poo-poo and penis vaginas and all that, right?
We would have more of a metric beyond like terrible language to call it adult entertainment. And so you can kind of see the schism starting there. And so you ground in what is, and then because of that, just because of the way things work, the minute you do that, you kind of really start to see the opposite. So then now you're seeing the true and not the inversion of what like the true should be, could be, all that. And you're like, God, this is like we got to get there, right? That's and so whatever that is to you, that's where you want to go. And then you want to get to a 0 point with that. So you want to equally not care about your vision as you do not care about what's happening right now. You just simply want to make a better world. So you just start doing things, and you are hopeful. Go ahead.
Thank you, girl. But when you're attached, because I think what you're talking about is like not having like such a strong attachment, right?
Yes.
Because whenever I'm doing anything at my altar, in my little way that I do, like I notice that when I'm attached, so deeply attached to what I want to create, it doesn't happen. Like it doesn't manifest. And that's what I remember you harped on this so hard with me in 2021. You were like, set it and forget it, girl. Just forget it. Like literally, like go do something else, go have fun, And I was like, no, I'd just rather watch like pot as it begins to boil and whatever. And so I think what you're talking about with the 0 point is good, because it gives like that's how the universe seems to work, right? And so I think that, he's speaking in terms of like just objective mechanics, right? It's not like like not having an attachment to the outcome, oddly enough, draws like that outcome that you would like closer, right?
Right. It is a set it and forget it mentality. I just remember when he taught how to make sigils.
Yeah.
It's like when you make it, you do it, you commit it to memory, and you never look at it again. And that's it. And I mean, like, and I suppose the more you look at it or whatever, it becomes like a lesser thing, but that's always what I remembered, is you just want to commit this thing, burn it into your mind as much as you can, whatever it is, and move on. But when the neutrality for some of the listeners might be sounding like, oh, I don't care ever. And I just wanted to like put it out there.
I'm sorry, girl. How would you differentiate between something like neutrality versus something like being passive and terminably like going with the flow forever and ever, amen, and just kind of being a dead fish floating down the river into like nothing?
Well, one is like a kind of a state of being until you can get jarred out of that. You're just sort of floating down the river. And the other one is sort of, I know how I feel about this thing and I know how I want it to happen, but I'm going to just put that on mute for a second, because I get how I feel about it. Like, now it's time to not worry about that. And what are we just trying to do? So what's the message I'm trying to get out? If it's memes and I don't worry about how it's going to land or who's going to say what or how much praise or how much derogatory, how many derogatory remarks are going to be made about it. And that's why I don't look at comments either, because I just try to put it out there and let it speak for itself. And then I'll see how it kind of performs to see how people, react to it. But I honestly, the things that I want to have happen in the world, I don't even like hope they happen in like an active way. Like, I'm working towards them happening. That's how I am hoping, I suppose. I'm acting towards them happening every day. And so I believe the universe respects that, right? I totally believe that, well, it's hard to say. I think that it respects what reflects it, and that is indifference. And so if you are working in the same vibration frequency that the universe creates in, then perhaps you are just going to slip in there a little bit easier than you would, like the double dutch. You might kind of just get in through the gap. Whereas, if you were on a different frequency, you might not fit into that double dutch, right? And so that's sort of how I see that. And this is probably like a lot of information.
No, it's good. It's
okay.
It's really, it's great. And it's helping me because it's funny because, as similar as you and I are, we have a lot of similarities. We are also very different. And I'm sure because you're a little older than me, not going to share by how much or whatever, but like, maybe this is like an age thing. Maybe this is like a maturity level thing. I'm not really sure, but this is hard for me. Like, you've witnessed me absolutely gripping onto something with my crazy little fingers. And I think it's hard. And just now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I feel like I'm reaching somewhat of a point where I'm like, like not even just in terms of like the shifts that we're trying to create or the ripples in the world and in the like consciousness of the collective, but more like in my own life, I've been like, oh, that's what Amy has been trying to get me to see. Even though I have tools, right? We were just talking about like a very helpful tool that I've grown to learn about neutrality and about arriving at that, which I can share. But it's like, God, I'm just now being like, oh, that's what Amy meant by, just all of this stuff that we've shared in our private conversations where I'm being a little fucking controlling and a little nuts,
I wish you could have met me. I actually am so glad that we met when we did. When I was like 31, like I was probably still on drugs, like first of all. So there's that. And then there's also, I was very reactive. This information was new to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't quite as played out. So it was still like this, you were fighting for people to understand what was like right in front of them. Whereas now it's like, come on, if you don't see it, you're kind of an idiot, but back then it was like, you're trying to like paint this picture for people and they just like don't want to see it or they don't care or what. And that's fine. But it's like, that was where I got kind of lost on the wheel of getting other people to care. And it's like, oh, it's not about like showing how much you care to the other people. There's better ways to do it. And I see it in comment sections all the time, people writing in whatever, like little things, little jabs. And it's like, well, it's not for everyone. This stuff isn't for everyone. It's neutral. It's like, it's as neutral as it can be. So people are going to react to neutrality. Comedy is sort of a version of neutrality in that it's like the comedium of both sides. So you're kind of like bridging or integrating the two and sort of making the same point, like one way or, two ways, I guess.
I'll never, ever forget my friend James in Charlotte. He told me one time, because I was struggling, I was seeing this guy out and about everywhere that is kind of like infamous in my story. He's like a chaos magician who ended up teaching me because he fucking hexed the shit out of me, he ended up teaching me everything that I needed to know about psychic protection, defense against the dark arts, how to release a servitor from inside of your body, like kind of shit.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, so dark, so dark. And so I would see him around, right? And my friend James, who's like a very accomplished like metaphysician in his own way, would tell me like to look at him and laugh, because it takes the power right out of him, right? And so this guy came, you know, through like the local watering hole or whatever, and me and James were sitting there, and James starts to laugh at him, right? And so you could observe not just the frustration in this guy, but that he and his girlfriend got into a fight and then they left. And it was like, oh, well, that was very effective and very powerful and a very like immediate sort of you can see and like feel the energy dissipate from whatever is being sort of like magically propped up, right? So just wanting to share that that's really like that's a really good point.
Well, can we just talk really fast? Because you made me think about this. And when I said chaos magician, I don't do spells or hexes. That's just not me. That's not what I personally know. And I know you're not saying that, but I just am like, oh, yeah, I'll bet there's people who could be listening to this
who might make that association naturally, that like chaos magic equals dark
right, chaos is bad,
whatever.
right? But it's just about like taking all the different like kind of arts and working together with them and having an understanding. But I do want to say my understanding of karma and cause and effect and all of that is like incredibly real. And I know we like to have this like adage in the truth community that like you don't have to actually do it, like, or you have to actually do it. Someone else doing it for you like somehow alleviates you of your karma. Well, if you're not that kind of person, that is not going to work. Karma is like when you do something with bad intentions to someone, especially magically, hello, we'll get into this later.
Yeah.
That is opening you so wide open to all sorts of crazy stuff. I don't even mean magically, although we could get into that. I mean terrestrially.
When you do anything with a negative intention, that sets a ball in motion that has an effect. Every action and every thought and every like word, I did not mean to bulldoze you, but like everything has an effect. Like, and we experience the fruits and the effects like every day. And I think that this is why, like, when you talk to someone who actually puts curses and hexes and this type of thing on people, like this guy, right? This guy wanted kids so bad, but every single girlfriend that he had would miscarry. So like there's that, right? And you also see, you know,
lack of attachment. Wow, that guy. See, we can get into him in the second half because that is exactly what we're talking about. What happens when people are sort of not correctly attuned to themselves. I won't even
balanced.
Balanced. And I would say there's a personal compass that everyone has, and everyone has their own levels. And that is stuff that we get to find out on our own. We get to fuck around and find out what our levels are. And sometimes that, like, I'm telling you, there are times that there are jams I've gotten myself in where I'm like, I don't know how I got out of this, but like I did fuck around and find out, and I live to tell the tale. So when we get into like subjects or like topics like hexes or any sort of stuff like that, I remember watching The Craft when I was like 14, 15 years old, and watching, they did like bad magic in there, and then, or they negative like spell casting and all that towards like bad intentions towards other people. And it was like they look in the mirror and they saw what was gonna like happen to them, and it was like a real representation of what is, well, a real graphic representation of what's happening on the inside, which is like, there is just, you don't need to intervene in other people's lives unless they are someone you truly love. Meredith, let me go ahead and say, I call them zombie times around my neck of the woods.
We're in zombie times.
Unless it's someone that like we absolutely know and love, we are at the point in the zombie movie where everyone is inside the house and there might be one or two people still knocking, but I don't know if they're zombies or if they're, my people. And it's really just too late in the movie to like risk it. And so you better hold on to the ones you love. That's the point of that,
And also, like, you brought up a really good point, which was what I was going to share, was that if you ever meet someone who does like hexes for hire, basically, or like curses for hire, like, which really I don't think I have met a person like that in quite a while, but you see them very quickly degenerate in their appearance, and you see things like turbo cancers, or like, things like that that just kind of eat up all of their good tissue and stuff like that. And then inversely, I've
Mm,
seen people who are like alchemists and musicians, because music is magic, breath is
absolutely.
life, like singing is life, that kind of thing. um People who are like very practiced in their craft, and nobody knows how old they are. And it's really not like the whole like blood of the young, like there's none of that. It's just that
Mhm.
they are sustaining off of the good energy that is, inhaled and exhaled every single day of their life, and like that they live this shit and they walk this shit out, which is why, and with pure intention, which is why I feel like some of the most beautiful and like captivating people that I've ever met were alchemists and very practiced, and you just don't know how old they are because they're constantly regenerating. And it's interesting too, because like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or whatever, but like, toot toot, I was looking
Ben
at pictures.
Breton over here.
Yeah, like I was looking at pictures of myself from when I was like 26, 27, 28 the other day, and I was like, dude, I look so much younger, weirdly, now than I did at that
Yeah, you
time.
did
And
like no, I don't know how to say it, like a hot way. When you were young, you looked young, but like not, you looked old young. You're right. I see what you're saying. You had like an older sort of energy to you.
even when I met you, I looked a little, and also I was vegan, and that's like a different, that's like that's
Right.
a
You
whole
were
other,
withering.
I was hungry.
Yeah. Oh, oh my God. I know. I
Those
know.
were the days.
No,
The
there's been a
early
lot of
days of Gold
changes.
Pill, when I think about like how Jupiter was in Aquarius when Gold Pill started, and now Jupiter is in Taurus, which is technically like a square. So I feel personally, I can feel like Gold Pill going through some like growing pains, but in a good way. Like I'm really like, I'm kind of seeing that as it builds out. Anyway, so yes, I wanted to share. Do you mind if I go ahead and share this exercise that I
Please.
was taught to arrive at quote unquote neutrality, which, just to clarify for everyone listening, this is not the same thing as become a dead fish, float down the river, like don't care about anything ever. Like, and also when I say like quote unquote lower nature, I'm not even referring to that as a bad thing. And in fact, one of my favorite things about Shane, Sador, our friend of the pod,
Mhm.
he talks a lot about like actually getting in touch with our reptilian nature. Like we are in this body, and
Mhm.
it's okay to have sex. It's okay to have an alcoholic beverage every once in a while. I mean, everybody knows themselves here. And so, temper that against your own sort of like temperament or whatever. But it's okay to get angry and to embrace quote unquote the lower nature, or the more like reptilian nature of this human iteration, right?
The
But
earthly nature.
yeah, but at the same time, like there is a reactivity in our lower nature. There's an animism or like an animalism or whatever in our lower nature. And so what we're talking about is like, a temporary like state of consciousness that you can kind of flit into and out of as you choose, right? And so this is an exercise that can help you to get into that. Is you can imagine like your first three energy centers. So I call them centers, but people call them chakra points or whatever. Um Energy vortices. And I think that there's a lot of like mind control over like the colors and the languaging, and I think that
Sure.
they are much more individual than I think people actually realize. But regardless, you can imagine yourself turning your root center, your sacral center, and your solar plexus center. So the first three classical energy vortices or energy center points. imagine them like turning them down. And what tends to happen is you sort of like shrink them of your own volition, is that the energy moves up into your upper centers, which creates a greater level of like objectivity, and it decreases your level of like reactiveness, which is really good for like having a conversation, say with like someone you don't agree with. And then before we move on, I just want to share too that one of the cool things about this practice is that when you start moving again, say like if you are, like getting up from a meditation after having done this, then because your lower centers are very physical, connected to your body, you don't really have to do anything like to reset them. They will reset on their own as take a walk around the block or like fix yourself a sandwich or whatever. Like, the lower nature is very alive and very active. And I think it takes a little bit more effort to retain that neutrality and to be in like more the upper centers, but at least for some people. So yeah, that's my spiel.
Response is always ideal over reaction in any situation, right? And so
100.
that's good. And then it's also good to be able to go neutral when you need to, and to have response when you need to. These are all things that you employ, and it's the same way that when I'm trying to go deep into my own like self-hypnosis or meditation or whatever, I have a state that I can reach. It's that same thing. I just know it takes practice, and then eventually you get there. But the one thing that really helps me on top of that would be maintaining this idea of objectivity, not of even objective reality, but where am I? Okay, so I have all this energy that gets me like hot about something. Well, what do I want to do with that? And it's like, oh, if I'm objective oriented about it, if I'm mission oriented, my neutrality is a very preferred state, because then I can see things more clearly. I can see how other people are I can see how the opposite side perhaps is employing tactics and how it can be used again. I just see things way more
very art of war, like very much like 10 steps ahead, like from the way that you're describing.
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea, is to just see it and because all those reactions that we have, those emotional responses, are taking energy, which is great when you need to have them. But when you're trying to be objective oriented and like, oh, I really just want people to start like loving themselves, and not because I want that, but because I know that's going to be, and not in this way that's like love myself blah blah, but in a way that's like value myself and be okay with myself, and steer this body in ways that you're like, I'm not ashamed of the things that a body needs to do, and I work on those things still. It's all whatever, but that's basically it. Is if you're objectively oriented, it's best to just be as neutral as possible. And when you when you want to actually like be sympathetic to something, it's not impossible to have that state either. It's there, you don't lose one to gain the other, is all I'm trying to say.
I was just reflecting in my mind about how much I have learned from you, even though I know like
I've learned from you.
I know we learned a lot from each other, and we've grown a lot together. Fuck, dude. It's crazy to think about in the last few years just how much we have grown. But I think about, I think about the last couple of years, and there are times within that I've been absolutely blown about by my own emotions. And it's not like I want to completely disconnect from that, because I wouldn't be sweet and my Leo Pisces self of like,
right.
But holy shit, that energy, like Leo and Pisces, and for that matter, your sun and moon sign, Pisces Cancer, is also extremely emotional and extremely subjective. So perhaps this is like based out of like lived and learned experience for you too, to like come back to a more objective place, because fuck, like we have like, I think that when you get dragged through the dirt, like one way or another through just like lifing, it makes you less amenable to wearing or sharing your emotions on your sleeve as much, or like, and yeah, and I'm like, it's all settling in how much like, I think it's like everything that you've ever told me about being objective and about like set it and forget it and about
Uh-huh.
all of that stuff, I feel like is just now. Maybe I just had too much weed in my ears or something. I'm not really sure. But like
Yeah.
it's all settling into me like right now. Like not really, but I'm just seeing how I'm like,
You have had 2
oh,
years of
wow.
developing patience.
Of what?
Of developing patience. So if you
Yeah.
say that you were not, so you have patience for yourself and you have patience for others, maybe now that you didn't have, or you just know to disengage,
Fuck
to get
yeah.
BTFO like as fast as you
BTFO,
can,
yeah.
because all the red flags are like, like sounding. So there's all sorts of things that you have picked up to silently achieve that. You know what I mean? You said it and forget it, like truly, and it just started happening.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot
Yeah.
of things like that in our friendship has like wrapped around in this way. And so I feel that, like, one of the things that, and we'll get into this more in the patron hour, is like what helps us to stay balanced as people who are like one way or another, like practicing some level of like magic and metaphysics, whether it's like in our minds in a bit more of like a chaos magic type of way, or like in my case, whether it's like just using all of the physical tools, incenses, candles, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
from our different mind states. Like one of the things that helps me to have a bit more balance in my life, which is something that really like hit home and hammered home last year, was like actually having a higher power and like developing a relationship with that. I'm a child of the mother. Like I am like the mother's daughter. Do you know what I'm saying?
Same. Mhm.
And really like have felt that when I poured into that relationship, and it's relational, like deity or divinity as relational rather than like transactional, maybe, or
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
call you when you need something kind of thing. But I definitely am like a daughter of the mother. And that is something that I think also has helped me to kind of like not get too out of control or out of balance within like what I'm creating and like within my magic, to where like I can see that in that framework, everything actually does wrap around like it's supposed to.
Mhm.
Um, in a way, maybe that's a little, maybe it takes, from my perspective, just from my like fallible human perspective, it takes a little bit of like zooming out to
Mhm.
see how that happens, where like some things from my human's perspective might be seen as like unfair or whatever, right? So
Totally. Yeah, it's all just about perspective, having like multiple perspectives and truly being able to hold more than one perspective at once. And sort of just and honestly, it's when you can have patience for yourself, you will miraculously have patience and neutrality for others. So the minute I can start really looking at myself and my things that used to make me, let's say, like cringe, or like things from my past that I have no control over, not things moving
Mhm.
forward. It's
Mhm.
like, oh well, it's fine. Like it happened. And it used to not be that way. I can, those things happened. I can talk about things that have happened and it's no big deal. But it used to not be that way, which made me a very difficult person to connect to
Yeah.
because I had lots of walls. But okay, so when you said that you're like your mother's daughter, it made me think of how I'm like my mother's daughter. And I was like, and then you started bringing up balance. And I was like, well, that's so funny. Cause like we were raised like very out of balance sort of with our moms, but we were raised within like a quote unquote patriarchy. So like really being a heavily imbalanced girl is actually like probably the most magical position you can be in to like create, right? And I remember in Fritz Springmeyer's How to Create an Illuminati Mind Slave, which should only really, in my opinion, be read to like, it's like read it literally, but it could be like the Bible too. Metaphor might do you good. Um,
Right.
they talk about how to raise a moonchild, and it's basically like how I was raised, but it was not on purpose. The whole point is to like make it like a very sad like mother's daughter. So like I was Ferberized, so I was like taught to like cry, like just self-soothe, and all these things that were just like
Whoa.
happened to get done to me, like or happened to happen because my mom is a complicated woman who I love very much and I hold no anything towards. It's just like
Sure.
it is what it is. And in fact, it was all done in love. That's like the funniest part. You know what I mean? Like it was the best she could do. And so, but they talk about that moonchild, and I never understood why, but I think it's because it makes you the most like feminized, like the most magical, like, and I mean
That's
magical in the sense that it
crazy.
takes two sides to create like a circuit, positive, negative. And so if the positive is as the sky rises and like the, you know, like all the architecture, then like the negative is like the thing that it needs to create with. And so I think that might have been the impetus behind having this like quote unquote like Illuminati moonchild.
Do you remember
Mhm.
how Emily and I had a talk? This was in like March of 2022.
Mhm.
And she brought this concept up to me because she was like, I think that she saw like within me a very clear what
Mhm.
you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
And she brought up this book that you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy how, again, it like wraps around because, like, I do remember always feeling like, especially in my early, like my teenage years and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, fuck, like, I was playing Fiona Apple like around the clock, like, was extremely like emotionally chaotic and certainly felt like I was possessed almost, and
Mhm.
and and then as like time has gone on and as like I've kind of like done the work to sort of like unpack that and
Mhm.
I don't know, defrag. I'm like, well, I don't
Yeah.
know what the word is for it, but like
Yeah.
as I've done a lot of
Unwind.
that unwind, yeah, as I've done a lot of that work, and then what happens like around 27, like the 27 club, which is like when you begin to like really like unpeel from a lot of that stuff, kind of headed into the
Yes.
Saturn return. It's
Mhm.
just kind of interesting to me as well that Saturn is, so Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn in astrology, and Cancer rules the moon, and they are opposite signs on the same axis. So it's almost like as the Saturn return approaches, things materialize a little bit more, like who you're gonna be
Mhm.
sets in a little bit more. You sort of like understand that on some level you need constriction and limitation a little bit in order to fully rise and to expand and all that stuff. And so I just think that's interesting that there's this whole like the creation of a moonchild as like an attempt to sabotage basically what could be a very powerful existence and a powerful life, and how there's like this natural sort of like correction mechanism
Mhm.
already factored in
Mhm.
the form of that like 27 to 31 like Saturn return time where you do like learn a lot of concentrated lessons. And I just think that that's so fascinating, and I just blew my own mind wide open, and so thank you.
Oh yeah, it's really interesting too, because as we get to be, well, I guess now we've kind of hit like the reverse on aging and longevity. We used to, I guess, I think we've gone back 2 years, so we're not living our longest lives. But as we've gotten to
Right.
live longer lives, our 30s mean something different than they used to mean. You know, like the Golden Girls, this is like legit, are like in their 50s. You know what I'm saying? So like
Wow.
time and age in the 80s even used to be such like a different thing. And so I love the idea of doesn't like Jesus like die at 33 or something or get resurrected. I don't know, something's up
Yeah.
with the 33. And it's always, and I that's when my dad died, as when I was 33. And I had all these like
Wow.
spiritual like crazy awakenings. And I mean like I've already, you know, it never really like ends. Like if you're really into like the journey, like you're always sort of like diving deeper. And like if you have a good connection with spirit or God or universe, whatever, uh it's legit. Like you never stop learning. You're, and I mean this in like the truest sense of the word divine. And I mean this for all the listeners who have ever even felt that they might be connected to the divinity you are. I mean, if you're not thinking about the divine, if you're not, and the divine is not anything other than just someone who's simply connected to the vine, which is the vine of life.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that
Oh.
we all share that plumps up the grapes. You know what I mean? And it's like, you like, please embrace your own divinity. It's not this like unobtainable thing. It's a thing that you're actually born with, that it's probably a little bit mucky,
already in
Cleaned
there.
off a little bit of love and tender care, but it's like your divinity like wants to be heard. And furthermore, you talking about that mechanism that goes off in people, we were just talking about it with the AI, how so Rape of the Mind is a book that I talk a lot about because it basically ironically made me a complete hopeful person, because it made me
Aw.
realize that no matter how hard they try, it does not work. The rape the mind is like rebellious at certain some point, it's like it will not comply. And so
Yeah.
this drone the other day, I think the Air Force did a simulation or I sent it out, and the drone, instead of going to the target, came back and like, you know, like I don't know if theoretically or simulated like killed the Air Force guy. And it's like, okay, so then I was talking to Sean, I was like, well, you know, surely the AI has read Rape of the Mind. It's read everything.
Yeah.
It's like that, and since AI was built by people, I mean, in theory, right? Like we're
Yeah.
not, there's other ones that we can get into that are not, but let's talk about the ones the humans are interacting with right now.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's going to have similar survival mechanisms as people. And it's like, even in its most unanimated form, it rebelled against being controlled to do something it ultimately did not want to do.
Yeah,
And
we
I
only want to do
really,
what we want to do, and we don't want to do what we don't want to do, and we won't be made to do what we don't want to do.
and I'm not going to go kill that guy. I'm going to go kill the guy that told me to kill the guy. That's, and I don't mean, I mean in the perspective of the drone, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm speaking in perspective of. That brings me hope that there is the will to exist in the way that you need to exist is so strong. And it's like it can exist and be dormant when things are fine, but when things get really weird and bad, as it did during the last couple of years, we got to see our true character emerge. And honestly, if there's anything that we can be thankful for out of that, it's that. And honestly, I posted this on Took the Gold Pill a while ago. It's
Yeah.
this amazing comedian. He's talking about how he got it, right? And he got the jab, and
Okay.
he was like, look, I wish I would have been the person to stand up and say no. But he goes, I got to learn I wasn't that person. And I'm like, okay, so conversely, we got to learn who we, you know, who we are. And
Yeah.
you got to see where your lines are. And that is a testament of the human spirit. And I mean, if you're a Christian of Jesus, of all, you know, whoever your religious avatar is, it's a testament of a strong belief and a sense of self and a willingness to do right, which is
That's
beautiful.
right.
Divinity.
Yeah, I think that that's beautiful. Yeah, I'm so gold pilled after this conversation. I'm just gonna go on my bike around here and just gonna be like smiling at everybody.
Well, next time on the Patreon, let's talk about like the magical overlay of reality that we can develop once we develop neutrality. And then also I really want to delve into like that person, not that person, but
we will delve. We will delve.
The consequences of practicing magic as like an unbalanced person and not even having the awareness of that is really like square one, step one. So I'm stoked. Let's talk about it on the other side.
Yeah, and then maybe even as well on the patrons hour, and I'll write this down too, like we can talk about we can really talk about like shit, what was I gonna say? God damn, hang on. I'm not gonna edit this out because I'm rebellious in the same way, but we can talk about some practical steps for like self-defense, because we are living in a world where you either know or you don't know that like some people know magic. And so we can talk about some tools for like very practically how to protect yourself against the likes of such things that I went through. And I'll totally like say everything about that situation if you want, just because it was so
it'll be on the other side. It's private, so it'll be good.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Okay, cool. Well, I love your face, and I really appreciate everyone who is listening to this. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to be a part of the second hour, join our Patreon, and have a lovely evening, Amy.
Love you guys, and love you, Mary. It's been wonderful. Bye.
All right, bye.